So, welcome everybody. We're going to be talking a little bit about threat hunting in the dark. My name is Shane Hartman. I am a principal consultant for TrustedSec. So, what I do is I end up smoke jumping into other organizations and looking at what they got. Most of the time, I'm doing incident response. However, I do run a number of the threat hunts, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about here today. Is a little bit about how to kind of, if you don't have a program going, how to kind of get one started. If you're in the middle of one, how to kind of get it in alignment and some things that you can do that we have learned from going on site to all these different places. So what we want to talk about is kind of like finding bad. That's the thing that we hear a lot when we are out there. We'll get a consulting gig, or we'll get somebody will come and say, hey, can you just find things in our network, just check it out and stuff like that. And that's not really what a threat hunt's all about. It's got more details to that, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. We'll also talk about where most threat hunt programs are when we actually walk in, and where you might be and where you can kind of move forward. And then where to kind of start your threat hunts, how to actually give them some context and some areas of hunts for some immediate returns, some things that you can turn around even this afternoon and actually have some metrics to work with. And then finally, we'll kind of wrap up with kind of like what's some leadership kind of things. What do they actually want to know, or what are they doing? Or what do they want from you? So a lot of times this is kind of how you start out. You're just doing your thing. You have no idea which direction or anything to go. And you got a manager or something like that comes to you and he says, bring me a shrubbery. If you know what that, if you know, you know, if you don't, do a little bit of Monty Python searching. AKA find bad, which you sit there and you go, well, what does that mean? What is find bad? What do you think find bad is? And they don't know because they're not technical. They're coming to you and saying, just find things. And it has one of the problems with that, or the primary problem is it doesn't have any context. What does find bad actually mean? Does it mean find an attacker? Does it mean, confirm a breach or employees behaving badly? What is it that you actually want to look for? And it doesn't have a focus on where do you want my attention to go? Organizations are generally large. So you have endpoints, you have infrastructure, you have perimeters, and you have different types of activities or hunts that might actually be relevant to that. You're not going to necessarily hunt in the firewall for stuff that is not related to it. So there's no reason to do so. You got to have some of that context. And then finally, what does actually success mean? Does it mean I actually find an incident, or I find something that's bad and that becomes an incident? Is that success? Or is the success that I didn't find anything and I have zero results? It's kind of nebulous. So you need to kind of work with that. And then, where do you end up? When you go down the find bad path, in my opinion, where you end up here. You end up getting eaten alive by a number of different resources and things that you have to be put in place. Your managers or whoever originally asked you to find something, if you don't find anything, they're going, well, what did you do during that time period? What did you look for? And standard kind of response would be you pull up the queries that you ran and things like that, and then their eyes glaze over and they don't know what you actually did. So they don't have any ROI or return on value for what exactly that you were attempting to do. And then on the other hand, if you actually do find something like employees behaving badly, or heaven forbid malware or APT groups, you're going to get eaten by the same monster yet again, but for a different reason, because now you actually have an incident on your hands and they have to address that. So it's a no-win situation when you do find bad. So what we want to do is we want to give context to it and actually create something that's a little bit better. So how do you actually do that? Or where do you start? And threat hunts can come in a bunch of different forms. You can use them to identify threats that may have evaded. However, there's a bunch of different other types that are there. You can do reactive. You can do, which is acting upon some kind of information that you might get. Think IOCs or things that are out there that you might want to react upon because it's information you're taking in. You can also do things like on telemetry or posture. This is based on your environment. We tend to call this the watch the watchers, where you get some information from other teams and you kind of check on them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. And then we want to get to where it's a little bit more advanced, where we get into what we call the proactive, where these are hypothesis driven, and you want to actually, what happens if, or how would I look for this? And there you're under no pressure. You're thinking about things and how they might manifest themselves in your networks. And then you can also do retro hunts later on, which is where you take these different types of hunts and then you rerun them again, either based on new information or you want to actually recheck on a cadence. You can also use what we call threat hunt frameworks, which can give context and structure. I think there's a Peak framework, there's a Tahiti framework, there's several of those, and we'll talk about one of them here in just a second. But remember, when you're doing threat hunts, the ultimate goal is to improve the organization's security posture. That's what you're trying to do. And you're not trying to go find bad or make people embarrassed or point. You want to help all these other teams that you're going to interface with. That could be the SOC team, that could be detection engineering, it could be red teams, it could be any number of these teams. You want to help them. So one of the ways that you can do that is by not dumping the information on them, but saying, hey, look at what we found. Can I help you with it? Maybe we can actually work together. And then you can get some synergy going back and forth between your teams. So kind of like the next thing is, so where are you specifically? We had our opening speaker that was talking about this. He created this framework that actually develops the like 4 different tiers that you're at. Some of you are going to be all over the place. Most of you will not be in the 3rd and 4th tiers. You're most likely going to be in that 0, 1, 2. You're going to be using your EDR to just pick up IOCs, and then you're going to kind of look for them. Maybe you're actually centralizing logging, but you're not actually looking at it unless there's an alert. You may be collecting that data in central places. There's really no rhyme or reason to it, so to speak. It's just you have pieces. You don't have an actual formalized structure that will get you out of those 0, 1, and 2s for the initial, minimal, and procedural into more of the innovated. How can you actually take this and do some real analysis with it and produce something that is actionable or something that you can use or something that you can report on? And then finally was the leading, where you start to automate it and make it actually useful not only to the threat hunt team, but to say the SOC team or the red team or detection engineering or CTI, all those type of activities. So you could have something when you get to more of these innovative and leading types of activities. You may get CTI or threat intelligence where they come in and say, hey, we've seen this vulnerability that's kind of come in. Can you go search for it? You can go right to your threat hunts and maybe you can qualify that threat hunt going, we've already searched for this type of stuff. We have no issues with this and we don't have to worry about it. Instead of actually having to create the threat hunt and hunt for it, which would be more of the, like I said, the ad hoc or reactionary. So there's where you want to eventually get to when it comes to that type of activity. This is, like I said, where most of you guys are going to be. You're going to be somewhere in here or in a hybrid combination between those two. We want to eventually get you from here into that innovated and eventually leading. And we'll talk a little bit about like some of the things you can start out with today. So some telemetry posture would be one of the first places where you might be able to start. And these are hunts that start with the question, how do we know what we know? You know, you have IT, who's usually a separate department from us. They assure you that EDR is deployed. We know where all the assets are. We have it documented, our subnets. We know where our clouds are. We know all this type of stuff. What the threat hunter does is they assume that there's gaps somewhere in there and they're going to kind of search for them. They're not to point out bad. That's not the point. The point is in order to increase that security posture. That's the kind of deal. And then we call that the watching the watchers. They tell us something, we validate it. There's a famous quote that is trust but verify. That's what we're doing right here. And then one of the outcomes can come from this is when you find a gap, you actually get to create another threat hunt that says, what didn't we see while the gap was in place? Maybe there's something that goes to the SOC or detection engineering. Maybe there's something else that we need to follow up on. So there's a lot that can actually be generated from there. And what can that kind of like look like? You can search for things like, are your subnets covered? Do you have, what do your VLANs look like? Are they all documented? You can search inside your zones, your DMZs, your core infrastructure, endpoints. Make sure that these things are all in their right places where they're supposed to be. Um, are you actually capturing all of your logs that you're expecting? I was recently doing one of these where I asked them that question. I was like, are you ingesting all of your logs in a central location? And they're sure. And I said, well, can you tell me a little bit about all the endpoints that you have? And they said, well, we have a mix of Mac and Linux and Windows. And I said, you have all of those actually come to this central repository? And they're like, no, actually, we don't have the Linux or the Mac. We don't have a way to get those. So I went back to it and I was like, well, the answer to your question, the original question was, you aren't capturing all of your logs to a central location. So you can't search that. That's a gap. You can't see into it. You don't know anything about that particular area. So it was a gap. It's something that they can work on closing or trying to find out a solution for, but it's asking the question. If you don't ask the question, you're never going to find the answer. That last part is in just perimeters, firewalls, third-party VPNs. You never know where an attacker or a threat group is going to kind of pivot and in and out of. So all these areas are definitely places that you want to make sure that you have coverage just for getting telemetry, but not even just about trying to actually hunt for it. You need to have the data first before you can actually do that. So here's a quick one. How do we know we have full EDR coverage? And we'll kind of walk through the thought process for it for a second. So you could get the number of endpoints covered that the EDR says. Let's say there's 2,000 EDR endpoints. Then you can go check, let's say you have a separate inventory system. How many are in that system? You can query Active Directory if you're a Microsoft shop. Then you can query even your IP space, your actual physical safe, and remove the non-compliant types of devices. And then you just do a differential of all those and try to find out where that gap might be. So what we did here was when you looked at that, we queried an inventory system, which is a control system based on a process, Active Directory, which is an authentication system, which actually relevant to the things going in and out. And we queried the IP space, a physical space set within your network, so to speak. So you're querying all three of those and you're trying to find those gaps to make sure everything is kind of covered. It's simple hunt telemetry, but the gaps, again, can be fed back into other threat hunts. And then when you close those out and make them closer to all zeros, that gap closure can be reported to leadership as a reduction in exposure. You now know that you actually have that because you have checked on what they said and you are watching the watcher. So here's some other things that you could actually do even today. You can just start asking yourself these questions and see if you can query your systems to find out where they are, whether it's CrowdStrike or Splunk or whatever it might be. How much static IP space do you have occupied? In many organizations, we have like the server or core infrastructure network is in its own static IP. So how do you know if new systems show up there? How do you know if systems are decommissioned? Do you have a way of actually checking them, or are you just relying on an agent type of thing? Do you collect PowerShell logs? What if you do collect PowerShell logs? What kind of things are you able to garner from that? Do you review your DNS logs, or even like some simple queries about software types of stuff? How many versions of Java do you have in your environment? Or do you have RMM tools, which are remote management tools, like a team viewer or other types of software that might allow remote access? Screen Connect would be another one. Attackers do use those as a leveraging point to get into networks. You can actually search for those. Are your service accounts staying within their designated areas? Do you know what your service accounts are actually supposed to be doing? Those are all types of things that you could kind of look for. And then do you even have an inventory of your service accounts and know where they are? Again, we're back to the watch the watcher type of stuff. So let's move a little bit forward on that. And last part before we move on to proactive is about the crown jewels. Every organization has some form of crown jewels and you can hunt against those, meaning that you can kind of add extra protection around what those crown jewels are. And you can garner that information from a number of sources. You don't have to use IT as that leveraging point. You can use things like If you have a business continuity plan or disaster recovery, they will help point out some of those things like what servers have to be started up first. Those are ones that can be positioned as those must be more important than other servers. Other types of just data, like human resource data, where does HR put their stuff? Where does, say, the financials put their stuff? Proprietary information, other things that are within the organization. Your SharePoint, which is actually a cloud, but you get the idea. That's where a lot of data is. And then you can hunt on those. So then the emphasis lies, what are the threats to these type of jewels? And what would happen if they were compromised, and develop a threat hunt that goes around to address that telemetry. And you can even go one step further from that is once you kind of develop all that, you can even do tabletop exercises to kind of walk through, here's how we would find it, here's what we would do, this is what would happen with compromise. You have a lot of pieces that you can actually put together here when it comes to that. So now let's talk a little bit about where we really want to get to, which is the proactive side of threat hunting. These are actually broken down into like 4 different categories, which is hypothesis, intelligence, and anomaly and analytics. So these are where you're starting to get more advanced type of stuff and just instead of just reacting or doing just generalized scans. So when we look at a hypothesis one, we're trying to look at just identifying attack vectors for your industry. You can map those back to MITRE. You can also identify critical assets and data flows, which we just talked about, and build your threat hunts around those. So like a hypothesis one, you don't have any data to work with it specifically would be just think about compromised Windows systems, persistence is through scheduled tasks. The MITRE technique is T1053. What would that look like in the environment? How would I find it? I may have an alert on this that SOC would see, but is SOC overrun with this type of activity? You can go check with them. Those are the type of hypothesis driven. When we get into the intelligence driven, we're getting into things like that, what CTI would give you a threat intelligence. And I use this article as an example. Disney's investigating a data leak after hackers posted internal online communications. If you're not familiar with this particular incident, it was they got into their Slack channels and was actually exporting that type of data. If you have Slack or you have Teams or you have other types of internal communications, you can use that as a leveraging point to try to see if you can do a threat hunt. What would that look like? What would the tactic be? How did they get in? What were the procedures? Read the article and try to position it. What would happen if it was in ours? What are the IOCs? What were the indicators of attack? And build your threat hunt that goes with it. When we get into the next part, we're trying to look at more statistical type stuff. So deviations from the norm. Examples is like a user attempting to access a system they normally don't, or a user using logins applications, which if you're not familiar with, logins, those are the living off the land binaries. So think about a financial person who might be leveraging cmd.exe for some reason, or running run DLL 32 and trying to leverage a DLL. Those are not things that are normal for their type of operation, so you can actually trigger on those. Other ones was greater authentication events outside of business hours, or trying to use privileged API calls in the cloud. Those are all things that you can kind of look for. The next one was more analytic driven. So this is more statistical data. What are we looking for in structured log analysis? I saw like DNS tunneling patterns or defensive evasions through log contamination. We had an engagement once not too long ago where the attacker actually ran a script that polluted the logs and made them roll over. So it was just hundreds and hundreds of repeats of the same event log and basically made the logs useless. Event evasion or defense evasion by silencing the EDR. So one of the things we do on tabletops a lot of times we ask is, do you do a delta check for your EDRs? This is a threat hunt in its own right, saying, how long was the last time that your EDR client checked in? And what is your threshold? Is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it an hour, a week? We are actually working one right now where the EDR was silenced 3 days ago, and we can see exactly what happened. Those are hunts or types of situations that you can kind of work for. Other ones is long-lived credential creation, stale user accounts, last login, unusual or limited use protocols. So these are things that you may or may not see, depending on if you can get down to the protocol level, kind of like besides IP, what other types of protocols that you actually have running on your network, and can you actually categorize them and take a look at them? That can be a little bit more advanced if you don't have the right telemetry, but if you can get into that, that's kind of useful. You can see things that you normally wouldn't necessarily see that are outside of an application life. So let's get into the executive buy-in. What are they actually looking for? They don't fund cool queries. That's not what they're in there for. They don't really care. They just want you to stop stuff. So here's what they're really interested in: risk reduction, cost avoidance, operational resilience, and board and shareholder equity. That's their job. That's what they're interested in protecting themselves. So what they want to avoid is reputational damage, liability exposure, regulatory compliance violations, and business disruption. That's what they're interested in avoiding. So you need to speak to them in their language and not in IT's language so that you can speak to reputational damage or how much things cost. So how do you do that? You do that by saying mean time to detect. This is how long something took to detect it, how long it took us to respond. Things like your attack coverage deltas. Make sure that you're covering all the different types of attack TTPs that you might have, and then put those in context of estimated financial exposures or how you could reduce. Lessons learned you can pull also is think of like ransom cases, what had failed, what had to fail for that to be successful. These are the type of things that you can produce into threat hunts and turn them into something you can talk to. I use this a lot on the TTXs. If you find that you have ransomware that's actually on your machine, a number of systems failed. You failed to see when they originally got in. You failed to see when they moved around in your network. You failed to see when they exfiltrated data. And for the most part, you failed to see when it actually deployed. That's like 4 or 5 separate threat hunts. If you could actually say, we got those all covered, you can use that as a mechanism to put it in going, other cases where it costs hundreds of millions of dollars, we can prevent that because we have covered all of our bases for what they failed to do. So other things you can do is translate those into value. Think of something like, we searched for T1080, 1078. That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear, we verified and closed our detections to blind spots across 40% of our cloud credential. This is kind of what they want to hear. They want to hear things like cost avoidance. The global average data breach was 4.4 million. We are showing hunts that are shrinking that mean time to detection so that you will not have a $4.4 million exposure because it's not going to really happen here. Or if it does, it's going to be minimized greatly. So those are the type of things that, again, that you're wanting to do. Some other common pitfalls to avoid is just don't do generic hunts, missing the key stakeholders because they're the ones that help supply some of that stuff to you. Failing to mature the program to get better. What we see sometimes is they'll get a threat hunt program started and then they'll just keep running the same threat hunt over and over and over again, and they're not really gaining anything from it. Over-reliance on like just the general atomic indicators like IOCs and domain names and hashes. Those are useful when you're in an incident or on certain things, but they're not always useful on an ongoing reference. Ignoring your operational baselines or your environment. Everybody's network is unique to them, so they're going to understand it better than others. Especially if a consultant like I come in, I don't understand some of the nuances about some of those communications. You can tune your threat hunts along with working with SOC and even detection engineering so that they don't get overrun because you understand your environments. And the last one here is don't treat threat hunts as a one-time event. Like you run it once and then you go shelfware it and forget about it. And then remember, it's not a checkbox. It's because if nothing's going to be gained from it, you're not going to learn anything. It's not going to be useful. And eventually your program's going to get shut down. So some key takeaways that you can do here is ground every scenario in some kind of like real threat landscape, something that's useful. If you don't have Java in your environment, don't hunt for it. If you don't have, Macs in your environment, don't hunt for those kind of things that are not relevant. Create smart objectives when you're developing a hunt. What are you trying to get out of it? What do you want to find out? And how can I use that as a leveraging point for either executive leadership or other teams to make them better? That's what you want to do, develop those hunts for. And then, again, I keep coming back to this. The goal is that it elevates everybody's security posture and awareness, not to actually just, pounce on people because you find something. And then Keep track of your hunts and your document output because those can come back for other reports, or when you want to do a retro hunt, you can actually, if you run a hunt and you actually have results out of it, and then you can run that hunt say 3 months later and the result set's decreased. That's a actionable thing. You can tell that we have actually improved our posture, and you can report on that. And then always be looking to automate and mature, make things easier on you. In the beginning, you might start out and it's going to be really onerous and hard to do. But as you kind of get used to it, you're going to be able to find ways where you can automate things. And the more you can automate, the more mature you're going to get, and the more you can actually work on even cooler stuff. And then make sure your threat hunts are successful if they provide value. They have to provide value to someone and not just be cool. You remember, again, the overarching goal is to improve your posture and not chase unicorns.